Well, speaking of marketing mind games, let's shift our focus over to the livestock markets. As joining the broadcast this week is University of Nebraska-Lincoln's livestock marketing and risk management specialist, Elliott Dennis. Here's our conversation from Wednesday morning. Okay, let's begin our conversation today talking about the feeder cattle market regaining a lot of the ground that they lost over the past month or so. Do you see momentum continuing?
Yeah, when we look at January kind of total sales and receipts that went through the sale barn, it was incredible. A lot of those cattle are being pulled forward. Feedlots eager to place cattle. I think there's profits to be made right now given kind of the beef complex that's out there. And so, yeah, the markets have definitely been beneficial. I think where we might see some slowdown in the future is that, as we've noticed, the live cattle prices have started to come down, lost about $10 over the last couple of weeks. And so I think that's going to put some pressure. Most of those break-evens are going to be around for producers around the 180 to 190 mark. So there's still some profits there, but just not as much as there were. And so as that kind of price dynamic between feeder and feds kind of changes, we'll kind of determine how quickly we're going to pull cattle forward, not if cattle are going to be placed in the feed yard.
Why do you think live cattle have kind of lagged behind when it comes to the rebound that we saw in feeder cattle?
I think there's just a lot of uncertainty in the market right now when we think about macro levels. I mean, think about all the kind of the policy changes that are happening. I think there's just kind of an overall concern about what's going to happen in the economy as people start to kind of think about where they're going to allocate income. I think that's kind of the overarching kind of theme there when we talk about just kind of the live cattle complex and why there may be some kind of bearish kind of where the prices should actually go and consumers' ability to spend on beef.
Well, pretty good demand out there when it comes to feeder cattle, as you noted, yeah, Elliott, and that was reflected in the latest cattle on feed reports. What caught your attention as you reviewed that data?
Yeah, the greatest thing that I saw was really no surprise there. I mean, we saw like what happened in the futures market right after the report hit. Really no change. It started trading sideways, really in line with the expectation. When we think about kind of moving forward of kind of where that complex is going to be at, we're thinking about, how, not if cattle are going to be on feed, it's how long they're going to be on feed. And that's really reflective in total harvest weights that we're seeing last year with all-time high of where we're at with cattle weights. This year, we've continued to even be higher than last year. And so cattle are staying on feed longer, which means there's going to be higher quality product out there, which is going to help on the export market. But really, when we talk about fat deposit, tallow prices have been high, which have kind of helped support. But as long as there's not huge discounts, that continue to be on the packing plant for yield grade 4s and 5s, we'll continue to raise them to be pretty fat.
You brought up demand a few minutes ago, but when it comes to demand, oftentimes we look at that through the price of box beef, which has been climbing higher over the past few weeks here. What do you attribute that to? Yeah,
some of it just kind of seasonality, kind of where we're at. When we think about kind of what's kind of carrying it, it's really kind of a lot of those middle meats. When we think about kind of what's kind of lagged behind, we think about this high-end prices. So think of like your tenderloin, which tends to be kind of a restaurant-based product. We're not seeing strong restaurant demand right now, and so that's why some of that price has come down. But I think it's really in line with kind of where we're at seasonally. But looking at kind of where we're at, generally there's price appreciation as we go in and really start to hit the grilling months come May and June.
Always amazes me when we talk about the grilling months. So we have to wait till May before people say we're in full swing because you get the weather we've had over the past week. And I see some of my friends are pulling out their grills this time of year. So
that's right.
I say it starts right now. Elliott, let's talk about some of the news happening in the world. New world screwworm got a second case confirmed, I saw, in Mexico. Is that going to impact imports of Mexican cattle or not so much this time?
So we've already kind of put in the protocols for import of Mexican cattle. 2 ports. Pretty strict protocol that USDA APHIS has kind of put in. I guess the real issue is going to be more kind of this feral cattle that kind of come back and forth across the U.S.-Mexican line, which I think is the larger biosecurity concern when we talk about New World screwworm. I think USDA APHIS is doing a good job trying to control those cattle coming in. It's a concern, I think, when we think about just the ability for those flies to kind of continue up as the summer months heat up. And USDA is trying to have protocols with sterile male flies out there. But I'm more concerned about just kind of the feral cattle that will come across the U.S. and the ability for us to even detect this. If we think about when this came out in the 60s and 70s, a lot of those people that were able to detect and kind of their whole job was to go out there and detect for this fly and eradicate it, are not working in the industry or are not active in the industry. So I think that will be the largest impact is how do we teach a new generation how to control this if it does come into the United States.
Well, that's been a discussion point over the past couple of months, but also in the background continues to be highly pathogenic avian influenza, not just impacting birds, but also saw that carry over to dairy cattle. A lot of discussion whether it impact beef cattle. Hasn't really been the case based on my assessment. I guess you can correct that. But do you worry about that impacting? Which one, I guess, do you worry about more impacting the beef sector?
Well, I would say when we think about eggs, that's one that's getting a lot of the attention, but I think the potential impact for the beef cattle is definitely on the dairy cattle, and specifically the transmission from human or from animals to people who are around livestock. That whole transmission is yet to be kind of fully fleshed out, but I think that's the greatest impact. We obviously talk about eggs. CDC kind of reports total human cases that have been involved with kind of highly pathogenic diseases or influenza. When we think about kind of the egg kind of sector, egg prices are higher, right? And it takes us about 6 months from the time we do a depopulation to the actual time those productivity kind of comes back online. Interesting enough, prices are high enough that we're starting to see kind of new market dynamics out there. But I think really when we think about the foreseeable future of where egg prices are, they are going to be elevated. And the sticker on that is there's no real good substitute for what eggs are. Higher beef prices, we tend to substitute into other meat products eggs. What's a good substitute for an egg in a baking recipe? There's really not one.